Welcome to Darkwatch Stories, where we bring to life the chills, the shadows, and the mysteries that linger in the dark. If you enjoy spine-tingling stories and want to support the journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now, sit back, dim the lights, and let's step into tonight's story. April in Daggerland usually arrived with damp soil and the soft lapping of Lake Erie. But that year, the first disturbance was the disappearance of 8-year-old Samantha Granger. In a town of only a few hundred, no one believed true danger could take hold. Yet on April 5th, just as sunlight brushed the lakeside rooftops, the girl vanished as if lifted off the path by an invisible hand. Daggerland's history was scattered across half-lost newspaper clippings, an abandoned trade route, a 1,908 fire, old rumors swallowed by time. People whispered that Lake Erie had taken more than boats. Sometimes entire families' fates disappeared with it. Still, no one imagined the next tragedy would befall a child who loved collecting smooth stones. That morning was unusually clear. After months of damp winter, sunlight washed the town in a quiet warmth. Children rushed outside. Adults opened windows. Samantha hurried out too, jacket half zipped, purple scarf crooked, running toward the lakeside path. Her mother bent to pour coffee, and in those brief 30 seconds, Samantha left the world of adults' sight. Her footprints trailed down the familiar sandy stretch, then stopped abruptly near the water's edge. No return prints, no drag marks, only her scarf caught on a thorny bush. The lake lay eerily still, like glass concealing something below. People whispered she might have slipped, but Sheriff George Lost felt a wrongness far deeper than an accidental fall. At home, Laura Lost stepped from the bathroom holding another negative pregnancy test. A year of rising and collapsing hope had exhausted her. George comforted her, though neither believed the quiet lie. "I'm fine." Then the radio crackled, summoning him to the lake. He left with a sense that Daggerland was about to reveal something he was unprepared to face. The lakeside path was wet and soft, carrying the scent of rotting grass. Deputy Mendez waited near the rocks. The beach felt suspended in unnatural silence. Samantha's footprints went straight, not zigzagging in panic, and simply ended like she'd stepped into a void. George, experienced as he was, felt something ancient watching through the still surface. Search teams, drones, and dogs were deployed. When Mendez asked if he thought Samantha drowned, George only replied, "Not sure." But deep within, he knew the lake hadn't consumed her. Something else had taken her. A deliberate force had reached from somewhere unseen. 2 days later, townsfolk gathered wordlessly at Holloway Park. Samantha's school photo fluttered on a wooden post, her brown eyes seeming to track the crowd. People held candles, whispering as if afraid of being overheard. When a breeze swept through, flames died one by one. George recognized the creeping chill of something vast beginning to wake beneath the lake. The following morning at the station, George found 9-year-old Owen Winters seated at his desk, pretending to read radio codes, while Crichton, a large black dog, guarded him. When George asked why he was there, Owen whispered, "The town feels weird. Grown-ups keep looking behind them, like something's standing there." The sheriff felt ice slip down his spine. Owen's father, David, arrived flustered. apologizing for losing track of his son. Hearing Samantha's name, his face darkened. "She's in Owen's class," he said. He hasn't asked about her disappearance, almost like he already understands. George felt the circle tightening around Daggerland's children. The radio shrieked. Another child was missing, 8-year-old Josh Maddox. His bike was found at Palmer's Bluff, a dangerous overlook parents warned children never to approach. George and David hurried to the scene, racing toward the lake where the air felt colder, the horizon sharper, the lake vast like a sheet of steel. Josh's red bicycle lay on its side without scratches, as though placed gently. George examined faint footprints leading toward the water, nearly identical to Samantha's trail, but this time, droplets of water speckled the reeds behind them, as though something had emerged briefly. Dripping, George called out, "Josh!" The wind rustled the reeds like a whispering reply. Officers spread out. David climbed the bluff for a vantage point. George remained near the water, recognizing the unsettling rhythm of ripples moving against the wind, as if pushed from below by something alive. Josh's footprints were deeper, showing fear rather than curiosity. Mud fanned outward with no turning back, no hesitation. A child had been drawn forward by something calling from the lake. George felt that chilling certainty settle in his bones. A twig snapped behind him. George turned sharply. Josh stepped from the bushes, pale, silent, clutching his backpack like a shield. He wouldn't speak. He only stared out toward the vast, dark water. David ran to him, relief turning quickly into dread as the boy refused to answer any question. Suddenly, a swell bulged in the lake, rolling straight toward shore. George braced as a long black figure rose slowly through the surface. A smooth head emerged, then broad, unnatural shoulders, humanoid but wrong, 2 long arms, claws like hooked fins, a wide grin full of jagged teeth. The creature stepped from the water in deliberate, heavy strides. It did not attack. It simply observed, smiling like a mask welded to its flesh. George fired a warning shot. No response. A bullet to its shoulder released inky fluid, but the creature only tapped the wound thoughtfully, as if studying the effect. "Get the boy out!" George shouted. David fled with Josh. The creature watched them leave before turning back to the sheriff, fixing him with hollow, unblinking eyes. George fired repeatedly, uselessly. Voices of approaching rescuers echoed. The creature tilted its head, listening, then vanished without sound. When the team arrived, they found only George, gun lowered toward the water. On the sand lay fading claw marks and unnatural wet streaks. "Not human," he told Mendez. Her expression shifted as she stared at the lake, now flat and cold as iron. That evening, the community hall overflowed with anxious residents. George announced that something near the lake was drawing children to danger. No one questioned him. Fear hung heavy. People sensed in their bones that something old and hungry had risen. After the meeting, George remained with Mendez and David. The air felt thick, the walls seeming to close in as they spoke. George described the creature. Humanoid, intelligent, smiling as if reading human fear, resistant to bullets. Observant, David confirmed he'd seen its stare, cold, indifferent. "What's the plan?" Mendez asked. George hesitated. then said they needed to keep people away from the lake and watch through the night. David protested waiting meant risking another child, but George knew they couldn't fight something they didn't understand. Driving home, George heard a low moaning rising from the earth, too deep to be wind, too resonant to be natural. He stopped his car to listen. The sound faded slowly, leaving him with a sense of being watched from the darkness beyond the road. Laura was away, so the house was silent. George's hands shook slightly as he lifted his mug. He stepped onto the porch, staring at the metallic surface of the moonlit lake. A ripple spread where no breeze blew. A shadow flickered and vanished. The next morning, Mendez entered pale-faced, holding Samantha's purple scarf freshly washed, untorn. Someone had left it at the station door. "It wasn't the one from the bushes," she said. George felt a cold truth settle. The creature was sending messages, and it knew exactly how to frighten them. He ordered increased patrols and forbade anyone from going to the shore alone. Rumors exploded across town, warm water at night. Strange movements beneath the pier, footsteps echoing from beneath the boards. Daggerland felt larger and more haunted than ever. At the Winters' home, Owen told his father he heard scratching beneath the house during the night. David realized the sound was too heavy to be their dog. Fear crept into him, and he took Owen straight to the station. At the station, Owen whispered to George, "Something's crawling up from the lake. I hear it talking, but in water sounds." George felt the pieces align. The creature wasn't just hunting, it was communicating, and only children could perceive its voice. That night, George patrolled alone. Wind rustled reeds. The lake churned unnaturally, circles forming against the wind. A long shadow glided beneath the surface, then vanished. A deep, distorted voice echoed across the water, calling, not to adults, but unmistakably to children. The next morning, fishermen found dead fish along the shore, intact bodies, but eyes drained white. Mendez documented the scene, but didn't know how to classify the impossible. George recognized the message. A warning from below. Rumors of an ancient creature resurfaced. Stories of children taken generations earlier, and the 1908 boathouse fire said to have sealed something beneath the lake. People remembered whispers they'd chosen to forget. George searched old records, discovering a 1963 report describing a tall bipedal figure fleeing from flashlight beams. The investigation had abruptly ended. Whether from fear or deliberate avoidance, the truth had been buried. That night, the lake's call came again, closer, deeper. When George turned away from the water, a soft splash behind him suggested something retreating quickly. The ripples spread silently across the dark surface. Returning to the station, he found Owen waiting outside. "It's coming closer," the boy said. "It walks under the water. It's heavy. I feel the ground shake." Mendez realized then, the creature was no longer confined to the lake's depths. George understood the truth. This was no random threat. The creature sought something specific. It wanted a response, and children, innocent, curious, were its chosen audience. On the third fog-thick night, George and Mendez patrolled the lake. Strange rhythmic splashes echoed from the water. A tall silhouette cut through the fog. A long wave traveled straight toward shore. The creature rose again, watching them with eerie stillness. It lingered at the waterline, half submerged, assessing them with intelligence that chilled the air. After several tense seconds, it slipped backward without disturbing the surface. "It didn't attack," Mendez whispered. "Not yet," George replied. People demanded answers. Some approached the lake despite warnings. A teenager filming bubbling water was nearly dragged back by officers. The creature tolerated observation for now. Josh, though rescued, still spoke only one sentence. "It promised to take us to the bright place under the water." George felt dread coil within him. What light existed beneath Erie's dark depths? George worked late as fog thickened outside. The lake thrummed with a deep, steady pulse. He sensed the creature drawing nearer to the town itself. Soon, it would no longer wait at the shoreline. The next morning, town workers reported the old pier torn apart, not rotted, but ripped upward from below. Deep claw grooves marked the wood. "It wants to come ashore," Mendez said. George replied grimly. "Maybe it already has," Laura called, frightened by rumors. George told her not to return. When she whispered that he was scaring her, he answered honestly, "You should be scared." That night, George dozed in the station until a soft tapping woke him. Something had knocked on the glass with a claw. Outside, fog-covered footprints of wetness leading toward the lake. He realized it had visited deliberately. At Holloway Park the next morning, a ring of small stones appeared on the grass, arranged exactly as Samantha often played. In the center was a deep, three-clawed print pressed into the soil. The creature was sending another message. "It knows what Samantha liked," George whispered. That meant it had watched her, observed her. Mendez asked if it was trying to communicate. George wasn't sure, but felt the truth leaning toward yes. Later, Owen briefly vanished before being found near the lake, Crichton growling and tugging him back. "It said there are stairs under the water," Owen murmured. "It wants to show me." His innocence made the words even more terrifying. When George asked what else it said, Owen replied, "Kids aren't scared of the dark. Only adults are." The creature wasn't threatening the children, it was enticing them. That night, fog rolled in thick as smoke. A tall black figure emerged at the lake's edge, fully upright this time, watching directly toward George's hidden vantage point. It lifted a hand and waved. George shone a powerful light on it. The creature recoiled slightly, then straightened with a wider grin. Light annoyed it, but didn't frighten it. Moments later, it slipped into the water like a shadow returning to its nest. A faint tremor followed, as if something deeper had shifted. George sensed the presence of something larger beneath the lake, perhaps the source from which the creature had come. The next day, George visited Father Emerson, who revealed old lore. Beneath Lake Erie lived a keeper that surfaced when young souls were being called downward. Their ancestors had burned the boathouse in 1908 to seal its entrance. The priest handed George a faded document describing that fire not an accident, but a desperate attempt to contain the creature. One line chilled George. "It cannot endure strong light, but it learns quickly." Mendez wondered aloud if fire could still drive it away, but bullets already failed. They feared the creature had evolved beyond its old weaknesses. That evening, the lake rose 10 centimeters without rainfall. Panic spread through town. Parents snatched their children indoors. The surface bulged unnaturally, as though something below pressed upward. George erected temporary barriers, but by nightfall, the water overtopped them, sliding onto the grass. This was no tide. It was movement, intentional movement from below. At 2 a.m., a call came. Someone stood outside the abandoned skating rink. George drove through suffocating fog. Headlights revealed the creature on dry land, tall, still, grinning at him. No water clung to it now. It had fully claimed the shore. It tilted its head, listening to his heartbeat. One step forward cracked the boards beneath its claws. George raised his gun, knowing it would do nothing. The creature wasn't attacking. It was demonstrating that it could roam anywhere in Daggerland. Then George realized its true objective. Not adults. It was hunting the children it had marked, Samantha, Josh, and now Owen, at home. Crichton erupted into frantic barking. David awoke to find Owen's bed empty. The back door was open. He sprinted into the trees toward the dog's growls. He found Owen at the water's edge again, whispering to something unseen beyond the fog. "It says I'll see the brightest place under the water," the boy murmured. Heavy footsteps sloshed beneath the surface as David carried him away. On the road, the footsteps ceased. George took Owen to the station. "Don't go near the lake again," he warned. Owen nodded sadly. "But it's lonely." It said so. Loneliness from such a creature chilled Mendez more than violence would have. George summoned his officers. "It's on land now. Patrol day and night. Keep children indoors. And if anyone sees it, don't waste bullets. Retreat and call me." They needed strategy, not futile attack. Night fell heavy over Daggerland. Houses dimmed early. The lake vibrated like a giant creature breathing. George monitored the shoreline cameras, waiting. Just past 1 a.m., a camera shook. A tall black shape glided through the frame, moving without true steps. Static swallowed the image. Then the feed died. George raced toward the lake. He found fresh claw marks gouged deeply into the sand. At the end of the trail lay a purple stone, Samantha's favorite kind, placed with eerie care. The creature had left another token. When George lifted the stone, cold surged through him. For an instant, he saw a vast underwater structure glowing faintly, like an alien cathedral beneath the lake. Then the vision snapped away. The lake released a long, resonant sound, neither roar nor call, but a threat. The shoreline vibrated underfoot. George stepped back, realizing the creature was escalating. At dawn, townsfolk pretended everything was normal, opening doors and greeting the day. Yet the lake looked impossibly calm, as if hiding its intentions beneath perfect stillness. George recalled Owen's words. "It's sad, because it's been alone there for so long." That sadness, twisted into a lure, was far more dangerous than anger. It sought companionship of the young. What lived beneath Lake Erie was ancient, cunning, and purposeful. It didn't merely hunt. It coaxed, beckoned, promised. And children, unburdened by fear of darkness, were easiest to pull. George reviewed the timeline. 2 missing children, 1 recovered. A scarf returned, stone circles constructed, the pier torn apart, fog-shrouded appearances, and sightings deeper inland. The pattern formed a path towards something impending. He realized the creature's intelligence was growing with each encounter. It mimicked human posture, observed reactions, learned boundaries, and tested them. It was preparing for something. Meanwhile, children across Daggerland began reporting strange dreams of staircases descending into glowing water, of voices whispering from beneath floorboards, of laughter echoing underwater. Parents dismissed the dreams, unaware they were all hearing the same voice. A voice that grew more confident each night. It reached out through the darkness. George positioned motion sensors along the woods near the lake. 2 hours later, one triggered, then another, closer, then another. Something was moving deliberately toward town. When officers checked, they found wet footprints that weren't human, leading from the lake into the forest. The prints stopped abruptly, as if the creature had lifted itself into the trees. A heavy branch snapped overhead. Officers shone their lights but saw nothing, only the swaying canopy, as if a large body had leapt silently from tree to tree. George realized containment was no longer possible. The creature had left the water entirely. Daggerland was now its hunting ground, and the children were its chosen quarry. That evening, George met with the town council, describing the threat as plainly as he could. Most didn't believe, but the fear in David's eyes convinced a handful that danger was real. The council authorized curfews. Volunteers patrolled streets. Yet none dared approach the lake after dark. The water seemed to pulse with unseen life. Owen whispered that the creature was closer tonight. He claimed the ground trembled when it walked beneath the dirt. George believed him. Children heard frequencies adults could not. Late that night, George heard scratching beneath the station floor. The boards vibrated. Something was moving underground slowly, heavily toward the building. He switched off the lights and waited in silence. A faint, watery whisper seeped through the boards, speaking in a language made of bubbles and pressure. A voice desperate and coaxing. The whisper faded. In its place came a deep groan from the lake's direction, as if something enormous were shifting its weight. The earth seemed to exhale. George confronted the truth. This was not merely a creature, but part of something larger. A network, a hive, or an ancient intelligence rooted deep beneath Lake Erie. Light might drive it back, fire might delay it, but neither could defeat something that had waited a century beneath the water. Evolving in silence, he understood the creature's pattern. It marked children with symbols, lured them with promises, left gifts, and communicated through sound. It wanted followers, not prey. The bright place Josh mentioned was no sanctuary. It was a lure, a glowing pit or chamber beneath the lake, designed to attract innocent minds. Perhaps a nest, perhaps a prison. Daggerland was running out of time. The creature was no longer content with whispers and symbols. It would soon walk openly through the fog, seeking the children it believed belonged with it. George stood before the morning sun, staring at the still surface of Lake Erie. Beneath that calm lay something ancient, lonely, and infinitely patient, waiting for the moment to claim the town's children forever. Thank you for listening to Darkwatch Stories. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can keep bringing you more. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware of what might be watching in the dark.